What's up, everybody? Welcome on in. It is finally playoff week in Norman, America. Finally, it feels like we've waited months and months and months, just a 3-week grind here. But Oklahoma and Alabama for the second time this year kicks off on Friday night, and we are here to talk all about it on the Sooners on SI podcast. Got myself, Ryan Chapman, here with John Hoover, Carson Field, Ryan Aber, getting the whole squad together. A big 48 hours for Hoove and Carson as Hoover is sporting right now. John, you've got a big Rams game to watch tomorrow, and then obviously coverage of the CFP on Friday. How are you feeling about the week? As it feels like we've had a media blitz with all the CFP stuff we've been able to do.
Hey, let's get this team in the playoff more often, right? As opposed to one bold press conference, we've had 4 CFP media opportunities now, and getting to talk to the head coach, which we did again today on a Zoom call. Muy bueno.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Very big 48 hours for the same reason, but a different reason. Carson's Seahawks. Carson, were we driving back from, was it the Tennessee? No, it had to be Alabama because who was in the car? It was the Alabama. The last time Oklahoma played Alabama, the day after the Rams and the Seahawks. Well, what a world we live in.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not listening or watching this one with John Hoover this time. I can show my fandom a little bit more, but I haven't been focused too much on that, admittedly, with big game coming up Friday. Obviously, all of the availabilities we've had, it's been awesome, so very excited.
Yeah, I went headphones in, tactical headphones in during that game because I was like, I'll stay along with it, but whatever's happening, good, bad, or otherwise, between the front seat and the back seat, I would like to stay out. This is the second time I've seen Ryan Aber today. Aber, hope your hoodie's good. He brought me over to do some manual labor, of which I couldn't do, and we ended up getting just like 3 guys down the street that did it for us, but that's A-okay. As Aber's building toward, what do you got, the Packers on Saturday? It's playoff stuff all over the place, and I'm just hoping that Fernando Mendoza doesn't get hurt, basically. That's my rooting interest in everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more interested in the Penguins right now with they're just announced that they're gonna sell to away from Fenway Sports Group to the Hoffman family, so that'll be interesting. But I don't pay super close attention to the NFL like week in and week out. Usually I'm dealing with my own hockey stuff on Sundays. But without a game on Sunday and with the Packers playing in a big time one, I was able to sit down and watch finally just in time to see Micah Parsons' knee blow up. So that's where I am on my NFL fandom.
Yeah, not great there. And fortunately, I guess, as much as last Sunday was about injuries all over the place, we'll start here as it's been the news of the week. Oklahoma, good news, actually, on the injury front as they build into this football game. Carson and I were in Norman. Well, Aber was there on Monday as well, but Carson and I were at practice on Monday, and the 2 big items that I think everyone were immediately eyes darting toward Carson were, 1, Mason Thomas. Is he dressed out? What's he look like? And then 2, Jake Michael. Is he dressed out? What does he look like? Well, Mason Thomas went through everything in the 15 minutes. It was just a small 15-minute portion early in practice. But we saw Mason doing everything, and lo and behold, Tuesday night, the first availability report of the week comes out. No Mason Thomas. He is fully available at the time of recording, assuming there's no setbacks, knock on wood, all the stuff. The flip side of that, Jake Michael, Oklahoma center, who only missed that LSU game, but if you remember all the way back to LSU postgame, he had talked about, or Brent Venables had talked about, he was in the hospital with an infection. Carson, I'll toss to you on this. He was listed as questionable on that. Watching, there's 2, he was off to the side. He was dressed out, but he was off to the side. And Carson, for me, there's usually 2 versions of that. The first version is guy standing off to the side, helmet in hand, 10,000 yard stare, where you're like, that guy's not close to doing anything. It's kind of like when we were there during fall camp, spring football, Jaden Gibson, like, for instance, would be standing off to the side. You knew, okay, he's not really close, do anything like that. Jake Michael off to the side, but as the ones would go through their, steps and things like that, he was at least trying to step along with them, even though he was in the back of the end zone, stuff like that. I would say, Carson, and you tell me, because you also were watching it, I would assume best case scenario is probably he's available to be the emergency center if things get to that, but I would anticipate Carson, Fabechi Wiwu starting at center, Ryan Boje starting at right guard, and Derek Simmons starting at right tackle.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely scenario at this point. It could be something like what we saw from Kobe McKenzie at Tennessee, where dresses out, sees if he's able to go, and if he's not, then they just play Fabechi at that center spot. Fabechi played obviously in the LSU game, started at center. I think he said that was his first time since high school, starting a game at center, and he played well. He wasn't as effective as he was at guard, but he still played a good game, still excellent in the pass block. So, I mean, it would be a loss for them, and you probably wouldn't see the exact same production that you would if Abechi were playing guard. But having someone that's that good of a player, gotten that much better, being a former walk-on, now being a finalist for the Burlsworth Trophy, move to center, he's shown that he's capable to do it. It seems like either way, they're going to have some sort of pretty good production at the center spot.
Yeah, and on the Alabama side of things, nothing else really shocking. Sorry for Oklahoma as far as the stuff that have been going throughout the year. On the Alabama side of things, running back Jam Miller, he was off the report, same as R. Mason. He'll be available. Defensive lineman LT Overton out for Alabama. That's a guy that had something pop up going to the SEC championship game and was kind of didn't seem like Alabama was super optimistic, but he's out of it on that side of things. And then today, Kalen DeBoer, both tight ends, Josh Cuevas and Lewis Jr., who were guys that were listed as questionable, I believe, on the first report. Kalen DeBoer said that both of those players should be available to take on the Sooners in Norman, which brings me all the way around to this, Ryan Aber. This is a very, very kind of weird setup because it was a bye week leading into the first Alabama game, and then we have the 3-week layoff where one of those 3 weeks is not really OU Alabama. It was a possibility, but we all thought everyone would move around. We've had a month, basically, when you take these 2 weeks and the first 2 weeks to preview OU Alabama. I don't know if there's going to be any grand new revelation, but when you look at the injuries and R. Mason Thomas, who didn't play the first time, and LT Overton, who did play 3 total tackles, I think 2 solo tackles for LT Overton, how much, if any, does the injury news and things shape how much different this could or couldn't be from the first go-round?
Well, I think it's going to be a different game regardless of personnel, just because of the situation, and also, two really good coaches who can adjust and do some different things. But certainly, if you're Oklahoma, you feel really good about having R. Mason Thomas back, especially given the fact that they had played really well on the defensive line at end, even without R. Mason in that game. Taylor Wine's been fantastic. Their depth has been developed there a little bit more with Danny Okoye and PJ Adebawore and those guys. But R. Mason Thomas is a difference maker. We've seen it a ton. We saw it the last time he was on the field against Tennessee. We saw it early this season coming off the targeting call, just how impactful he was from the jump of that Auburn game. And I think this is a game that certainly he's going to be fired up to perform well in. Certainly his last game at home, potentially his last game as a Sooner. And then, on the Alabama side, the defensive front is the strength of their group. And, not to have LT Overton there, whose dad played at OU, is a big-time loss for them, and will certainly affect how they're able to, get to John Mateer.
I'm really interested, John. If nothing else, one of the big things, R. Mason Thomas is available. Here's what we don't know. We don't know, does R. Mason Thomas, he's available and he looks good in the 15 minutes of practice that Carson and I were there for, but Oklahoma has him on a pitch count, and so maybe he's only a third down guy. Or is R. Mason Thomas so available that he plays every snap, even if Oklahoma's defense is on the field for 90 snaps? Like, that's what we don't know, and we won't find out until the clock hits 0 on Friday night, all that stuff. But for Alabama, they don't know that either, which means that they just see R. Mason Thomas available. That means the first time 32's on the field, it would be a big mistake to not prepare as if R. Mason Thomas is 100%, which maybe that shifts things throughout the game if they notice, hey, he's only in on 3rd and long, stuff like that. But things that we saw in the first game, Kip Lewis, unblocked a lot, had a ton of time to do whatever he wanted. Taylor Wine, wreaked havoc. Grayson Halton, really nice game. All the way down to when Brent Mills wanted to sprinkle in a corner blitz and Day Jordan was able to come in and trigger and produce a big play. it feels like, in a way, despite the fact that Oklahoma and Alabama have already played once, and despite the fact that Kalen DeBoer has prepared for this Oklahoma defense a couple of times here in the last 13 months, it almost seems like Brent Venables might have more options at his disposal, even if at the absolute worst, R. Mason Thomas is just the highest paid decoy on the field.
Yeah, so assuming that Oklahoma is playing, showing all its cards that like they're supposed to on the injury report, the availability report, assuming that he's not on there for a specific reason, meaning he's 100%, like if he's or close to it, right? He's definitely going to play. If he's 80%, 90%, I don't think he's going to be on a pitch count. I think he's going to be, they rotate their guys all year anyway. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he's going to be a guy that comes in, makes an immediate impact, affects the way that Alabama calls their protections up front, for instance. Whether it's the offensive line or the just the center or the quarterback, they're going to see him standing out there, and they're going to say, okay, we need to make sure we get a chip on him. We need to make sure we get a combo on him. We need to make sure we have his pass rush covered, because he's been out he missed the last 3 games. You know how hungry he's going to be? And when he gets hungry, we've seen what he can do in the fourth quarter of games, near the end zone, against Jackson Arnold. When he wants a sack, right, he's going to go get it. So I would expect him to have a really big role in this game.
We know our Mason, the closer. We also have seen, you're talking about the safety, we've also seen when he has to sit on sideline for one half of football, and his first play in, he almost gets another targeting because he's flying through the air, stuff like that. And the craziest thing about all this, Carson, I think, is that, rightly so, there's been so much attention on R. Mason Thomas and making the playoff. What time has that been bought for him to get back in? But another thing, which is bad news, I think, for Alabama's offense, Jaden Jackson, he was a guy that was limited in that first contest. He went out there. I think it ended up being 12 snaps. They tried him as the rotation guy in like the second and the fourth series. So we didn't see much Jaden Jackson after that. Carson, for an Oklahoma defense that already did a really good job holding Alabama in the running game, an Oklahoma defense that already mission accomplished once as far as trying to make Alabama one-dimensional, if you get a Jaden Jackson that's had an extra 3 weeks, and he talked about that on Monday, I think it was, and all that, even if R. Mason is just there for third and long, Oklahoma's defensive line, I think, is going to be substantially better because they're getting back a healthier version of one of their best run stoppers, who they were great in November even without him. That's just another guy that they will have back in the fold.
100%. And it's one of those things that I wrote about Jaden Jackson earlier this week, and I didn't realize that his stats are more or less parallel, maybe even slightly better in some categories this year, despite sitting out of the Kent State game and despite being very limited the last 3 games of OU's regular season. I mean, that just speaks to how disruptive he is, how effective he's been when he's been at full strength, which you saw in games. Auburn's the first one that comes to mind in this year's season. He was a menace along with R. Mason Thomas, David Stone, Grayson Halton that game. But he's such a brutal player that getting him near full health it's monumental for the defense.
And it's a defense, too, that we know is a group that, going all the way back to last week when we talked to Eli Bowen on the practice field, and he said, yeah, I mean, sure, we played well, but we feel like we could play a lot better. That's kind of been a through line. We've talked to Owen Heineke this week. We talked to Jaden, like we said. We've talked to Kendall Daniels and Ryan. It's a group that it feels like the way that we talked to them, it feels like they played bad in that first game against Alabama. And I'm like, guys, I understand that Alabama, you gave up yards and stuff like that, but you limited Alabama's offense to 21 points on 75 plays. And that's before it was this version of Alabama's offense where I think Brent Venables and his coaching staff put out kind of a blueprint of how you can maybe frustrate Ty Simpson. I know that there have been rumors that Ty Simpson's not 100%, but this was the Alabama team that had just gone through the gauntlet of 5 straight ranked wins, and they were streaking coming off. That was a full confidence Crimson Tide that Oklahoma held to 21 points. And this group, maybe the hypnotists that I've talked about for 2 weeks have really gotten in there and figured things out, but this is a group that the first time Oklahoma's defense has a little success, I do wonder if there's a little bit of, here we go again, especially for the guys that were in Norman last year that got held without a touchdown.
Yeah, I really like what we've heard from Oklahoma's defense when you hear about those guys talking about, not being satisfied. And I don't think it was I mean, I think that's sort of Brent Venables' perfectionism, uh, you trickling down to the rest of the defense, and the way that he's been able to, project that in a way that seemingly doesn't burden them, but gives them, sort of that edge to continue to push to get better, which is what we've seen during this winning streak. I think that's really big, but they did play really well against Alabama. I think, yes, the yardage, you can point out some things. Ty Simpson got a lot of yards, but a lot of that was late when Alabama really had to push the ball downfield through the air. A lot of it was on, a couple of big plays rather than, any significant failing on this defense's part. But I really like the way that they're responding to things. And I think it shows that this team still has that edge that has carried it through, because that was one of my questions. How are they able to continue that after a layoff, after doing it for, 4 consecutive games? Will that, be tough to get back? But certainly you would much rather be in Oklahoma's position or a position of strength than Alabama's trying to figure out an OU defense that really nobody has figured out consistently all year.
It's something that I'm really curious, and I don't have an answer for this, and sorry, I don't have many answers, but you look at it and go, when you have a rematch like this, that it felt like that second half was defined so much by Alabama came out, had the first fantastic drive, and then like you said, Aber, they did not really move the ball again substantially until that last drive, and on that last drive, things had changed. Alabama clearly was not overly hurried, so they got the ball back with 6.5 minutes left, and it became a weird thing. Like, Oklahoma wasn't in a prevent, but they were like, hey, we're okay if you want to try to nickel and dime us and get 2 yards, 3 yards, check down, stuff like that. We're just trying to keep you at a field goal range. Then that turned into, obviously, the decisive drive there. I kind of wonder, does this chess match pick up right where we left off, where Oklahoma clearly at halftime found answers to slow down Josh Cuevas? He was the leading receiver, the tight end, 80 yards on 6 catches, I think, for a touchdown. 60 of those yards came in the first half, only 1 catch for 20 yards in the second half. And if Oklahoma is able to pick up there, that's where I think things become really interesting, guys, because I think that Alabama's running game has gone backwards since Oklahoma played them. I think that the Crimson Tide just become, it's much like when you talk about Oklahoma's offensive line. Outside of Michael, guys are there, but they're beat up, and that doesn't show in like missed snaps or things like that. And then suddenly, if you're able to take Cuevas kind of off the table, Carson, it becomes all right, Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, awesome players, but Oklahoma did a pretty good job. Colton Giller and Eli Bowen had success, and Oklahoma's defensive line, I think, did as much to help those guys out on the back end, too, by generating so much pressure on Ty Simpson. I'm just kind of curious, Carson, is it that, or is it back to a game reset where they come out like prize fighters and kind of feel each other out and everyone plays a little bit safe in the first quarter on Friday night?
It might be a little bit of both, but to your point about stopping Williams, Bernard, some of their weapons, I feel like the adaptability of this defense hasn't necessarily been talked about enough, just with how much better the secondary's gotten since Cam Coleman burned them earlier in the year, specifically Cortland Guillory. Cuevas obviously had a big game against OU the first time, but you look at how OU did against Bauer Sharp, Norfleet from Missouri, other tight ends before that game too. I felt like they played really well against the tight end right for Ole Miss. I feel like they've just really adapted throughout the year in every area of the defense, whether that's the secondary, like I just mentioned. But I do think a lot of it is we're going to see some different looks from both coaches. There's going to have to be some adapting done by both defenses because Ty Simpson still, even with how he's looked lately, still a heck of a football player, heck of a talent, and they obviously have all the athletes in the world. So there's still going to be plenty of adjustments to make for Brent Venables.
And it's something, too, that I know we talked to Kobe McKenzie on radio on Mondays and talking with Kendall Daniels, John. Seems like everyone's kind of asked, like, what can you guys do better in your position group? And I think the linebackers, they talked so much about we need to tighten our coverage. And they didn't say the words Josh Cuevas, but I think it was a lot of It seems that the conversation at halftime in Tuscaloosa was simply trying to be like, hey, boys, that's on you. Get your butt over there and make that happen. And Oklahoma did. I'm going to be really interested to see how that starts. And then I guess like the flip side of it is you've got some creative minds and Ben Arbuckle, Brent Venables, Ryan Grubb, stuff like that. We've seen Alabama use way more like trick plays, deceptive stuff. I almost wonder if that's what Alabama tossed out there early, trying to use it's going to be a pretty interesting, like, where do you pick up when, as Brent said, you've played 3 times in 13 months. It feels like there's going to be no secrets between these two coaching staffs.
Yeah, for sure. No secrets. As well as these guys scout each other, as thorough as they're going to be as coaching staff scouting the opponent, yeah, there's going to be no secrets. But I think you could look back at, say, just the Tennessee game the week before Alabama, right? When Owen Heineke comes on that blitz. I don't think we've seen Owen Heineke blitz very much throughout the season, but he comes on that one blitz. I can't remember. I think it was 3rd down, forces the fumble. Our Mason Thomas brings it back for a touchdown. I don't think we've seen that from OU all season, other than that one time. Maybe once here or there, but that's something that I would expect. Alabama is going to go back and they're going to scout that game, just like Oklahoma is. But they've got 11 other games that they need to scout too. They've got, situations that they're going to look at, and they're going to read their old scouting report, and they're going to say, wait, remember now they did this. It's going to cloud things a little bit. If you go back and look at, I've got the statistics up right here, the 406 yards that Alabama put up against Oklahoma's defense, which was, OU will tell you way too many, but like you said, a lot of it came late in catch-up situation. 406 yards was their 5th best offensive output for the season. Okay, you know who the others were against? Louisiana Monroe, 583. Eastern Illinois, 539. Vanderbilt, 486. And Wisconsin, 454. So the 406 that Oklahoma gave up was an aberration on both sides. I think Alabama's offense has shown that it can be explosive at times, but in 2025, I think you'd more qualify them as a little bit limited at times, especially running the football. You made reference to the rushing yards. After they had 80 yards against OU on the ground, 269 against Eastern Illinois with 8 touchdowns. Let's throw that one out. Then they had 158 against Auburn, which is pretty good, and then they had -3 against Georgia. So when you put it up against the context of the entire season, they were under 100 yards rushing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Half their season under 100 yards rushing. So this Alabama offense is probably a little bit more limited than what we're used to seeing from the Crimson Tide, especially with an offensive genius like Kalen DeBoer, right? But I think Oklahoma's going to come into this game with, oh, you don't think we beat you bad enough last time? That kind of mindset, that kind of chip on their shoulder. Those guys, as we know, I mean, I made reference to it today on the Zoom call with Brent. There's a lot of chips on those shoulders in Norman, Oklahoma.
A lot of chips going around all over the place, and I thought Tostitos was out of bowl season. Guess not. It'll be interesting. It's one of those things where you go, hey, every coach starts off if we could build the ideal game plan, we would stop this or that and make everybody one-dimensional. Alabama's like willingly one-dimensional in a weird way, and we saw for a while that was great with Ty Sims in the Field Journal, but like we referenced last week, and like Carson was saying last week, you look at a couple of picks against Eastern Illinois, that ended his strip sack streak, but he had fumbled the ball off of a pressure in 4 or 5 straight games before that, including Oklahoma, when Taylor Wine got there. So there's plenty of reason to believe that Oklahoma will be able to put themselves in positions to take away the football. It'll just be, is it like what we saw in November, where they're able to get a bunch of turnovers against Tennessee, against Alabama, get an interception against LSU to erase an interception, or is it going to be like the first part of the year where it's like, man, they're doing everything but take the ball away, but it kind of feels like the dam has broken there. Before we get off the defense over to the offensive side of the ball, just real quick, we did have news on Wednesday. It was reported, I believe it was on 3, that Kendall Dolby intends to head to the transfer portal, and then he came out and confirmed it with the tried and trusted iPhone note, screenshot, tweet, yada, yada. So he makes number 2, Jaden Gibson and himself. That's another one of those that, much like Gibson, obviously was not with the program. I don't know if we have a great insight on just tried to come back, did come back, played 4 games, stopped playing games, clearly tried to maintain a year of eligibility. And when you look at it, part of why Kendall Dolby has not been a big factor for Oklahoma this year, other than just kind of the injury comeback, which obviously is tough, and everyone was rooting for him there, was just that when you have Kendall Daniels, who's done such an excellent job at that cheetah spot, and Reggie Powers, but especially a Kendall Daniels, Carson, that's 6'5" and has everything you want as far as covers like a safety, hits like a linebacker, all that. Oklahoma didn't really need Kendall Dolby at corner, didn't really want to be a corner, and Kendall Dolby's not playing over Eli Bowen, who's had 2 excellent Alabama games, Cortland Giller, who played great against Alabama, or even Devon Jordan, Jacoby Johnson, who have been big in this game in various roles the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's not for any fault of his own that he kind of lost his role, but he kind of lost his role. I mean, Kendall Daniels, I don't think anybody, at least I didn't expect him to be as effective as he's been on this defense. Wasn't as productive in his last year at Oklahoma State as he was earlier in his career there, but he's been fantastic. Reggie Powers the third, he's just been great depth in the secondary too. Just one of the many younger guys that have been really good with his snaps so far. So I mean, there's not a whole lot of other places that Kendall Dolby could have really gone. I mean, cornerback, but you mentioned Eli Bowen, Cortland Guillory, Gentry Williams when he's healthy. There just really isn't a spot for him, and I think he's kind of understood that, come to grips with that, and now he's going to find somewhere else to finish out his college career.
Just interesting, especially because you look at the other side of the ball, and not that I'm expecting like a massive role, like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to play 70 snaps on Friday night, but a guy like Javonte Barnes, who was asked about a couple weeks ago, someone else who very clearly was trying to keep his red shirt intact. Well, guess what? Much like a bowl game, once you get to the college football playoff, these games do not count against your eligibility counter. So you can play every single snap of the college football playoff on both sides of the ball and still maintain your red shirt if that's what you want. Javonte Barnes, probable on the first availability report. Javonte Barnes out there at practice where Carson and I were watching him go through reps, everything like that. So feels like Oklahoma much more solid, if nothing else, in the hey, if Zay Robinson takes a big hit and Torrey Blaylock takes a big hit early, you've got a 2nd and 1 in the second quarter that you just want to try Javonte Barnes on that 2nd one to pick up the first down instead of going to Jaden Ott, like was on the field on 4th downs against, or in the 4th quarter against LSU, excuse me. Or like say you get behind Javonte Barnes, one of the best pass blockers in the backfield on this football team. Maybe it's a guy that is out there and becomes John Mateer's personal protector. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like for this Oklahoma offense. Guys, I think as interesting as it can be for a week where we're just doing press conference stuff, it's been an interesting week when talking about the conversation around the Oklahoma offense. And I go to Monday night, not at practice, but after practice. Brent Venables has his coach's radio show, all that stuff that you can listen to. And Aber, I wrote about this, but Brent, in his first segment of the show, is talking about, they're just talking about how you spent the bye weeks, the off weeks, improving, things like that. And he goes, hey man, this offense, I've seen incremental improvement day by day. We put 38 seconds and 1 timeout out there, and they had to go kick a field goal. Now, granted, does that mean they just needed to get 1 first down? Who's to say with the Luke Rosa winner out there? But Brent Venables said he was fired up about what he's seen from this offense. And I think that's been, Ryan, a pretty consistent message, not just about the offense, but the entire team. But they're talking to Brent Venables today on the Zoom, or where we talked to him Monday. It seems like Brent truly believes that the incremental growth that this football team as a group took during the year, he believes he's seen that out of the OU offense, which would obviously be fascinating for a group that you'd love to have all the turnovers, and Oklahoma's defense is certainly going to try to, but it's hard to price in that Oklahoma's going to get an opportunity to cash in for 17 points off turnovers in the playoff. Means offense got to make up for it somewhere.
Yeah, they don't have to be, the Oklahoma offense from Lincoln Riley. They don't have to go out there and post 50 points, but they've got to be able to get first downs when it matters and put a couple of scoring drives together. Because, like you said, you can't count on all those, points off turnovers in this one. I think they need to be, clearly better on the offensive line front. With Fabechi Wiwu having some time to sort of settle in there a little bit more at center, I think that's good if he plays as we expect, and also to get Derek Simmons back a little bit healthier than he's been. Some of those other guys with just sort of nagging things that they've dealt with there. I thought it was interesting. Also, we didn't see Jacob Sexton on the list. It would surprise me if he played much of a role there, but fascinating there as well. And then to be able to run the football at least somewhat outside of just John Mateer. Mateer had that great 20-yard run in the first one. He's shown some real abilities there, and that changes the way that defenses can react. But you've also got to be able to run the football with your running backs, whether that's Xavier Robinson, who's back at least healthier than he's been. Torrey Blaylock, who looked as good in the LSU game as he had since that win over South Carolina about a month earlier, and then whatever Javante Barnes can add to that. So they don't have to be, this doesn't have to be a massive difference, but if they're able to head in the right direction, maybe get some more of those things going vertically. It doesn't have to be, 50-yard passes, but just to be able to stretch the field a little bit and do it in positions where you're not going to put the ball in danger of turnovers, then this offense can look a lot better, a lot quicker. And so it doesn't have to be just night and day. It just has to be, like you said, incremental improvements that can show themselves. So that's going to be really interesting to see if they live up to that on Friday night.
Yeah, guys, I was a little interested. Brent Venables today on the Zoom call got a question about the open practice. What was that? Yesterday, Monday, and he got a question about the tape on John Mateer's hand. Why wasn't he wearing the tape? And he's not wearing the tape because he doesn't need the tape anymore, right? That's obvious. But Brent came out and said he's still not pain-free. And forgive me if I'm forgetting, which I tend to do a lot these days. I don't think we've heard anything about his pain tolerance or being pain-free or experiencing some discomfort ever since he returned for the Texas game after the surgery. I don't think anybody has talked openly about, yeah, my thumb still hurts. Yeah, I'm still having trouble gripping the football. And I was on a radio show in Tuscaloosa today, and they asked me about Mateer, and I said, yeah, I get the feeling that he's not going to throw a 60-yard bomb, or he's not going to fit just a laser in a tight window. He's going to throw the football where he can, when he can, but look for his contributions to be heavily on the ground as a runner, as a threat to run the football. I mean, that kind of lines up with what Brent told us today about his numbers have really kind of, we've been over it several times. His numbers passing, throwing the football have kind of dipped since he's come back from that surgery. So makes you wonder just how, he's better now, right? You would think he hasn't suffered any setbacks. He's better now than he has been. But here we are mid-December. We're heading toward, the college football playoff, and who knows what's beyond that, right? There's 3 more games after that if they keep winning. But holy cow, your quarterback's thumb still hurts from September? That was kind of surprising to me.
It was also like not a random toss in, because it wasn't like a long answer, but he like you said, he was just asked, hey, at the open practice, we saw I didn't have the tape on the thumb. What does that mean for him? And Brent's like, yeah, he'd probably tell you that, he's still not pain-free, but as far as structurally goes and grip on the football, he's much better there, which leads all the way back into my grand theory from a couple weeks ago is what the mindset, the hypnotism, whether you feel good or don't feel good, when you've thrown all your life without the little sling tape on your thumb, and even if you're practicing with it and all that stuff, it goes down to when we would do media sessions, and Carson, you've been in the middle of all of them. When it's post-practice, usually if you go back and watch the videos, it's John Mateer, like, I don't know if it's like a nervous tick or whatever, or just that he needs something to do with his hands while he's talking to us, but he's usually like scratching at the tape or fiddling with the tape because he comes right off the practice field. I do wonder if this is some even if it's a 1% thing that in the back of his head, even while he's playing with it, even if during a game he's got adrenaline not feeling, he's like, oh, I've got this tape on my thumb, yada, yada, yada. And now it's not going to affect his grip, stuff like that, if he rolls out there no tape on a Friday night.
Yeah, it's hard to know, admittedly. He has come out, like Hoof was saying, and denied that there's been any sort of discomfort, any problem with the hand since returning. I do remember Brent Venables on the SEC teleconference a few weeks after Mateer's return, he pretty much was like, yeah, it's hard to expect Mateer to be full strength immediately. It's a process. So I mean, they've said somewhat conflicting things in that regard, which we've talked about. That's an admirable characteristic for your quarterback, not to make excuses, just to put the blame on yourself, even if it is bothering you. But in reality, Venables probably is onto something about, yeah, it's going to take a while. Even if Dr. Shin is this legend that he has made himself out to be in Oklahoma, it's still going to be a recovery process. And maybe that is still carrying into this college football playoff game. But having no tape, I think, would be pretty massive. Just as far as grip, maybe it is a mental thing to some degree.
If there's not even just like a split second hesitation because of that, then a lot of that timing stuff over the middle of the field, which it feels like that's been what's missing from the first month of the season on. They've tried a couple of deep shots here and there. That's not come off very well with Mateer overthrowing things like that. And that's even just since the Texas game, going back to the Missouri game. But this offense, I don't think it needs a 70-yard bomb or something like that to figure it out. If they could just get 20% of the John Mateer who is able to either rip it with no hesitation over the middle of the field to Kanik or Satania or Burks that you got in the first month of the season, or the John Mateer that's able to generate enough velocity when he's scrambling around trying to make things happen to find Jaron Kanik in some of those third down drills, or Satania like he did against Michigan. It's like, if you could just get this much closer to that guy, that is what you're talking about. If you can get a little bit of that, a little bit healthier Xavier Robinson, a John Mateer as well, that maybe is, again, we talked about this a couple times, going out of the Auburn game, I was more concerned initially about what was going on with the big tape job on his knee than his hand, and all the focus shifted to his hand. If you can get a John Mateer that's got that much more wiggle back in the open field because his knee feels good, his hand feels good, Aber, we're talking about, I mean, what do you think? If Oklahoma puts 27 points on the board, they win this football game, barring like a big turnover that sets Alabama up on, plus territory or something like that. It's not needing 50 points on the board to offset what you expect the defense is going to give them.
Yeah, exactly. I would be, stunned if they lost this game if they're able to, score in the high 20s there. And, like we've all said, it doesn't have to be this massive leap. All they've got to do is protect the football, which they've done a pretty good job of, outside of really the one game there during this stretch. And then just get a little bit more. And I think the more comfortable that John Mateer is, just that can make a world of difference because, yes, I think there's no doubt that he's been in some level of pain, but I think it's also just about the feel and the comfort level to things that we just haven't seen quite there in the same way that it was early in the season when he was, looking like a guy who had the potential to win a Heisman Trophy. We don't expect him to be that kind of quarterback again, but every little bit helps. And I think if he's able to, shed that tape and just, like you said, maybe that little moment of hesitation isn't there, or maybe you just can fall back into muscle memory and not have to, try to work mentally to get to where you need to be. That can make a world of difference in this one. And I think that, I expect, I don't expect John Mateer to play like he did early in the season. I don't expect him to play like, Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield or any of those guys. But I would expect him to play probably better than he has at any point since returning from the injury because of, some of those factors.
And if you can get that, then it just becomes, I think, my next biggest question on the offense would be that this game is one where Derek Simmons was able to get back the first time, and we didn't see as much Ryan Foje. Then Foje forced back into the lineup in a big way against LSU. This lead up, especially if there's no Mikla, can simply having Ryan Foje in between Derek Simmons and Fabechi Wiwu and getting really, really comfortable with that, having two pretty veteran guys and Fabechi being the vocal leader of this offensive line. And you would assume in a spot where, as raucous and rallying and insane as the crowd's going to be on Friday, this offensive line's going to have time to communicate and have the conditions to communicate. It'll be really, really interesting because, as we all remember, Alabama, they'll move Pierre all over the place, and that's like, as much as Alabama is going, okay, is R. Mason on the field? What do we do from there? For Oklahoma, step 1, 2, 3, and 4 for digest this Alabama defense is, where's Pierre? What do we think is going to happen there? And making sure that everybody's on the same page up front, because outside of the big turnover, I think we've seen the Oklahoma offense, John, whether it's perfect, imperfect, whether they're just waiting for Burks to outrun everybody or Satane to outrun everybody. That's going to be the big thing for me when you're talking about like the run game. Can they build some of these drives together, especially if Xavier Robinson is feeling better, even though he still had that big brace on his right knee at practice? I wouldn't imagine, even if he feels great, that's not going to come off until he has to in a game situation, just not re-aggravate something. But can you get enough consistency when you're, once again, reliant on 2 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman to take on Alabama in a college football playoff up front?
Yeah, and if you look at just some of the numbers, Oklahoma, I mean, the big number for me, without a doubt, is red zone efficiency. Oklahoma's first in the nation. Alabama's 50th. Alabama has missed, I think, 7 scoring chances. Oklahoma's the only team in the country who has cashed in on every 100% of their scoring opportunities in the red zone. That's huge. That is huge for this offense because they're not real great at running the football. They're not real great at throwing the football. They're not real great at taking care of the football. I think they're -2 on the turnover margin for the season. But they get in the red zone and they score. Credit to Tate Sandell, obviously, and the whole field goal unit thing. But taking care of those opportunities, hitting them when you get them, right? Like the 20-yard touchdown run after the turnover. Mateer turned that thing into a fumble on punt return. He turned it into a touchdown run. So that's something that Oklahoma absolutely has to do. You can't screw up. You can't have turnovers. You can't give the football back. Remember the Tennessee game last year where they got three turnovers and gave 2 of them back almost immediately. You can't muck around and do stuff like that. So, yeah, you're right. If Xavier Robinson's healthy, and we assume Torrey Blaylock is healthy, I think Oklahoma has a chance with those 5 guys up front, because if you look at who's been starting, they've got the same starting 5 for 3 games in a row before Mikula went out and Fabechi had to go over from right guard to center. So if Mikula's back, that'll be 4 out of the last 5 games. You've got the same starting 5. Your quarterback's thumb feels a little better. Your redshirt freshman running back's knee is a little bit better, a little healthier. I think those are all good signs for Oklahoma.
And you'll have the what could potentially be the trump card in a game like this is Oklahoma special teams are a major advantage. They were a huge reason why they were able to win that first contest, whether it be Isaiah Satena's punt return initially, whether it be Jaden Hardy punching the ball out of Ryan Williams' arms, whether it be Tate Sandell, your Groza winner, being money, whether it be Taylor Wine leaping lines of scrimmage and getting a hand on it, whether it be the fact that Alabama had a punt blocked against Georgia, or a field goal kicker that seems ready to just like rip everybody's head off the second that one thing goes poorly. It's just kind of funny that they come into bowl season, heading into bowl season, if you look at SP Plus rankings and stuff like that, Oklahoma was either 23rd or 25th in the nation in special teams efficiency per SP Plus's model. Alabama 113th, and Oklahoma's special teams, which were a tire fire to a certain extent the first 2 years under Brent Venables, they were headed up by our old friend Jay Nunez. I asked aloud on the pod after the 2023 season, why does Alabama want to poach Jay Nunez from Oklahoma? I don't know. I don't understand. And now Doug Deacon, the guru who was great at San Diego State, has Oklahoma special teams up and running. And Alabama special teams are an absolute disaster. I don't know what Jay Nunez has on people. He must be a great guy, but I don't think he's making a big-time positive impact on special teams. So be sure to clip that when Alabama has like 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown that decide this football game.
Deacon has been a godsend for OU special teams. You mentioned the SP Plus ratings or the efficiency ratings. OU's 22nd in the nation in punt returns. Alabama's 66th. OU doesn't return kicks. It's an option that they've chosen. They don't care to return kicks, so they're 133rd, which is what, next to last in the country. Alabama does return kicks. They're only 113th in the country. So point being, Alabama's special teams, again, I think they've missed 7 field goals. They're shooting about 66% from field goal range, right, on the season. That's not good. Their punter averages 41 yards per punt, about 42 yards per punt. That's not particularly great. Remember now, Oklahoma's punt teams have set up, they've been inside the 20 a handful of times. They've set up the defense for safeties 2 times this year with dropping the ball inside the 5-yard line. So it's been, guys, you hate to say it because it's such an overused term, it has been complimentary football at the highest level for the Oklahoma special teams and the Oklahoma defense.
Everybody drink, our old pod game. Anytime you get complimentary football, everybody take a swig, whatever you got in your cup. Got a big water bottle right here that we'll be hammering into. So it should be good, should be really, really exciting. And it's like we talked to Tate Sandell on Monday, fresh off his Grows to Win, and he was like, yeah, man, I feel like, yes, everyone has nerves, but Doug Deacon lets us be us. He doesn't put limits on us. And he's like, if the offense scores, awesome. If it's out of my range, I know that Grayson Miller's going to pin him deep. And if it's my time to shine, then we know what Tate Sandell can do, which has been pretty fantastic. And we'll get it going Friday night, 7 o'clock. All the things, if you missed any of it, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com is the place to be. So thankful if you've stopped by to scroll by one of our tweets or clicked on a story and read through that or anything. It's been a fantastic run up here. We got a ton of great content still in the holster ready to get that going. So Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com for all of your Oklahoma, Alabama needs. And if you like it, tell a friend. Do us a favor there. Before we get out of here, though, boys, we broke it down left, right, and center. We'll have a big post-game pod, all that fun stuff. But there are other happenings in the world of Oklahoma sports that we do need to get to. On Saturday, we were at Paycom Center. Brady, Carson, Aber, and I all hanging out there for the Bedlam doubleheader. It went very, very well. If you are an Oklahoma basketball fan, Carson, you were there for all of it. But let's start with the men's game. You've been on top of the men's side of things. It felt like this was a kind of a culmination of they found a little bit of the defensive touch in the second half against Marquette. They got the offense going a little bit against Wake Forest. Felt like they kind of needed all that, and whether it be Xavier Brown, welcome to the party, Nigel Pack, or just the defensive stops toward the end. That's the version that of this basketball team that I think Porter Moser and his staff thought they were putting together, thought they were getting when they assembled this roster.
Yeah, that was a similarly complete performance to the Wake Forest game as far as the offense looked really good with Pack and Brown. Both of those guys have really come into their own lately. They were awesome against Kansas City last night. Not saying a ton, Kansas City's not any good, but doing so against Oklahoma State, which is a much improved team from last year. The offense was great. The transition defense was night and day better than it was against Arizona State 1 week prior, way better than it was against Gonzaga and Nebraska earlier in the year. So they're making progress, and I think a lot of it does come down to this is a very transfer-heavy team. 4 transfers, a couple of freshmen. It's a lot of newcomers. They needed a lot of time to gel, I think, and they took 2 steps forward with those Wake Forest, Marquette wins, 1 back against Arizona State, but beating a team like Oklahoma State, neutral site, a much improved OSU team, like I said, that's a good win, and it gives some momentum because barring something crazy happening, they're going to come in with only 3 losses in non-conference play before SEC play starts. And the SEC, it's not easy, but it's not quite the gauntlet that it was last year. Maybe they're able to put together a pretty good season in conference.
Think 2 really good signs. We mentioned it, but Xavier Brown, Porter Moser had mentioned that he had an ankle injury. It felt like that Bedlam game. Was the first time to be like, that's the guy I think that Oklahoma thought they were getting there. And then secondly, maybe more of a secondary thing. Kai Rogers, we know that there's so much excitement about that in the Wisconsin exhibition game. Then he had gotten banged up and was a doubt for Gonzaga. But between Bedlam, which Mo Wagi had some elbows flying left, right, and center, and then you look at that UMKC game, it looks like this is like the perfect opportunity to ramp Kai Rogers back up in because Oklahoma's going to need both those bigs down low in SEC play.
Yeah, I actually asked Porter Moser about that last night after the game, and that's his plan. Like, it's intentional that the minutes have slowly been increasing. I believe it was 15 that he played last night against Kansas City. It was 13 against Oklahoma State. So just kind of subtly getting him into the mix a little bit more, like you said, fighting off an injury earlier in the year. I think that's big. He's very talented, very just adds a lot of size to this team. So that's huge in addition to guys like Darion Reed, Mo McGee. So getting him more comfortable just gives them one more weapon in the front court before conference play.
Then I guess the only other notable thing, Oklahoma took care of this against UMKC. Did they have an update on Dayton Forsyth? Because looked like he landed on another foot, rolled an ankle, which just sucks for his ankles have been they've been under fire in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was his left or right, but it was the opposite of the ankle that had been bugging him. So now he has two bad ankles, according to Porter Moser, but they don't really have a true update on his timetable.
Well, plenty of time there. He's on the R. Mason Thomas plan. Two bum ankles like he was a couple of years ago. That was the front half of it. Back half of it, Aber and I were there for the Sooner women. It was a fun, chippy at times matchup for the first two quarters. And then it felt like Oklahoma just patted Oklahoma State on the head a little bit in the third quarter and said, once they started turning the ball over and getting the ball down into Reagan Beers, as I said very uneloquently on Twitter, the Crimson and Cream rose to the top at the Paycom Center in the third quarter, and it was lights out pretty quick for the Cowgirls.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen in these last couple games, especially, that there's no team outside of UCLA, who they played in the second game of the season, that's going to be able to match up with Reagan Beers on with their defensive end. And Beers was fantastic, but I think you're seeing growth from Aaliyah Chavez, and I think better decision making there. Wasn't her best shooting game on Saturday, 6 for 14, but was 5 of 8 from inside the arc. So she's able to get to the bucket a little bit. I think, as you and I talked about some this morning, just sitting there chatting, Peyton Verhulst's role has shifted significantly on this team, where she's not asked to do as much, ball handling in the offense, and she's been able to be, comfortable doing whatever they ask. Sahara Williams continues to be fantastic on both ends, but the growth that we've seen out of Zaya Van, I thought it has been, really key for this team. I think the biggest thing is how well they're going to be able to handle just a 7 or 8 person rotation there. With clearly their top 5 are as good as any starting 5 in the country. But when you've really only got Kaya Smith and Brooklyn Stewart that you can rely on, I think Keziah Lofton will continue to be more of an option as the season goes on. But the rotation there is pretty limited, but their starting 5 has just been phenomenal.
And the good news of Keziah is not only is she a freshman, so you expect freshman growth, but she's coming off of, she'd gotten back for 2 games, I think, off of her pretty gruesome injury that had basically quelled her senior year of ball. So she's just getting back into the flow of things, and you hope that Beatrice Holliton gets a little bit healthier, because she's someone that if Oklahoma needs to go with a double big or maybe a bigger bodies in the rotation, that was something they didn't have to do against Oklahoma State. Brooklyn Stewart stepped up to a spot where she could take all those non-Beers minutes and things like that. I think that's really, really positive there. And much like the men, they've got a couple of games to ramp into SEC play, and it's not the most treacherous start to SEC play until it is, when suddenly they're at Kentucky and then LSU at home and South Carolina at home. So should be good there. They'll be back in action on Monday, believe, at the Lloyd Noble Center. And finally, it's not a pod with Aber and I without sneaking some softball news in. There's no sneaking about this. This was the softball shot that was heard around the softball world, at least yesterday. Last we left off, it was getting the report from Carson at the beginning of December that Sophia Bordy, former number 1 overall pitcher in the 2025 class, who reclassified to the 2024 class, she had joined up with Oklahoma a year early, just a redshirt, did not finish the year with Oklahoma, ended up leaving the team, headed back home. She never rejoined the team for fall ball, which led to the question, was she going to portal or what that was going to be? She did enter the transfer portal on December 15th, and 11 days later, it's Texas, the reigning national champions. We have a Red River transfer portal situation. We've had that with Brennan Thompson in football. We've had a couple of Bedlam transfers on the football side of things. we get our first Red River transfer here, Aber, and people were paying attention. We could say that. So Sophia Bordi, it's a rare thing too. We didn't ever get to see Sophia Bordi pitch because her reclassification came after fall ball 2 years ago. Redshirting, she was never going to pitch, and then she was not ever back in Norman this fall. This is a complete unknown for Mike White with taking in, obviously, Mike White, a pitching guru, pitching specialist there. But welcome, April 11th, 12th, 10th, 11th, 12th in Austin. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, at least one, it's in Austin, but two, even when Texas makes their way north of the Red River, hey, Mike White has somebody to take some heat off of him, because I can't imagine OU fans are going to be too fired up with Bordy there with her move. But still a lot of potential there. Like you said, we never really got a chance to see her. Oklahoma is clearly in a pretty good position pitching wise. They've continued to be. But hey, if you're a pitcher and looking across the landscape, if you're not going to go with Jen Rocha and Oklahoma's staff, I mean, Mike White's as good as anybody at working with pitchers nationally. And, not an overly surprised that she would wind up there, but it's going to make for a fascinating series for sure, even though it was already going to be incredibly fascinating, but just another layer added on top of everything.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, especially because that's what I was so curious about, not to dive into too much stuff. Like, she had gone home, she had made a pretty impactful statement and had gotten some a ton of support from Oklahoma's program, players, coaches alike, just talking about the mental health and what athletes go through. But her being from the Philly area, when you enter the portal, if you're looking for a big time program, you're gonna have to go away from home again, and we knew that was probably going to be a very, very, very highly sought after talent. But to head to Oklahoma and Texas, go from a 4-time national champion for the previous 4 years to the reigning national champion. That series needs no extra spice, but spice we have with our friend Mike White. Always good to us. Always good to see Mike White. I know you guys don't like him. Aber and I do. Sorry, tough. He's great to talk to. So we'll get that going.
When you're writing words for a living, he makes things a whole lot easier, and he delivers it in an accent that's just fun to listen to.
Tough, and if that means that Aber and I get to reprise our road trip from a couple years ago, then so be it. Don't have to tell us twice. But, gentlemen, before we depart and before we break until we reconvene for the college football playoff postgame, have we missed anything? Because all the days are running together. I don't remember the last time we spoke. We talk every day off pod. It's hard to know what we've hit, what we haven't.
A quick dive into one more number. OU all-time against Alabama, 5 wins, 2 losses, 1 tie. One of the 2 losses was basically for a national championship. It was the college football playoff back in 2018. That counted. That was not that they don't count, not that they all don't count, but that was the game in this series. Oklahoma really, really, really would be good to even that thing up in the games that counted 1-1 when they play on Friday.
Yeah, how about this for first number? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, go. I think we're going to the same place. You go for it.
I think another number was Brent Venables brought up the other day that no team had beaten Alabama twice since, I believe, 1894, 1893.
Yeah.
Anybody know who that was that beat Crimson White? I believe.
I just looked that up. It was the Birmingham Athletic Club.
Correct. So Oklahoma can join a prestigious club of the Birmingham Athletic Club, which I don't believe exists anymore, and certainly doesn't exist in the same way, and Oklahoma as teams that have beaten Alabama twice in one season if they're able to win on Friday.
Sounds like the BAC had a good year in the transfer portal that year.
Yeah, they hit it hard.
Isn't that what Tom Brady bought the Birmingham Athletic? Oh, that's Birmingham City. That was a joke for only me. Sorry to everyone else. And with that, I'm going to put myself in timeout because of that. Big thank you, per usual. If you want to do us a huge favor, give us a 5-star rating, review wherever you get your podcast, send it to a friend, all that fun stuff. But the biggest favor you could serve us is to simply come back on Friday night, which will actually be Saturday morning when we get it up. But post game, the squad, we will be podcasting deep into the night from the press box at Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. Do we have the whole squad going? I only get my emails.
I think we're 5 for 5 going to be there. I've been invited to Brady's tailgate, so I think we're all 5 for 5 going to be there. And yeah, that's it. Just wow, going to be fun weekend.
With it being a Friday, my schedule's slightly different. I'll be especially crabby because I'll be up 6 to 9 doing my normal radio shift, and then instead of doing I usually trade around for like the last post-game shift so I can sleep in on Saturday. No sleeping in for me, so we'll see if I'm able to get a nap, but on game days, who knows, I'm the big worry wart. I'm like, the second I go to sleep, I'm terrified that 7 things are going to fall out of the sky, and it's like, nope, I'll probably just be up and wired for sound with like 7 Celsiuses in my backpack. So it'll be good. It'll be must-see TV regardless of what happens. And hopefully for all of you probably listening to this, we'll be like debating Rose Bowl plans for how we're going to get there, stuff like that. That would be good news for you guys and certainly for the excitement around this thing because, I mean, this is one of those things that I've not even really, guys, talked about the atmosphere because I know what the atmosphere is going to be. We may not have seen an atmosphere like it, but it's going to be incredible. Just watching the college football playoff games last year, the ones at home this opening weekend were unbelievable, and I think there were a lot of people sitting around just going, man, what I would give to be a part of that, just be able to go to one, see it, be in the mix, and 1 year later to have it in Norman and it be Oklahoma and Alabama. I mean, how thankful are we? How blessed are we? Because I think it's going to be an absolute show on Friday night.
I'll tell you this. I don't think any of us here on this podcast looked to the future in 2025 and said, I think Oklahoma could be in the college football playoff next year. We looked at the the Military Bowl that we went to last year, coming home from Fort Worth after a loss to Navy, and thought, gosh, wouldn't it be great to cover a college football playoff game one day again, in the 12-team playoff, because it looked a long ways away that was ever going to happen in Norman, and here we are.
I mean, if we would have said what's more likely that we're going to be covering a year from now when we left that game, would it have been a playoff appearance or a coaching search?
Yeah, coach search.
I think most of us, or all of us, probably would have said a coaching search.
Yep.
And here Oklahoma is in the playoff, and Brent Venables is riding high.
With all of the chaos that's happened across the country, thank you, Brent Venables. I'm happy we're not covering a coaching search right now. And here's the good news. Brent Venables remembers those comments. He's not going to hold it against us, though. And so that's the good news there for Brent Venables. If you don't understand what happened there, be sure you head to Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media, and watch the press conferences back this week because Brent Venables has been must-see TV. He's been pretty good this week. But all right, that'll do it for us. Like I said, we'll talk to you guys Friday night, win, lose, or draw, after the game, breaking it all down. What does it all mean? We will tell you as soon as the Sooners and the Crimson Tide are done with everything from Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. For Aber, for Carson, for Hoover, I'm Ryan Chapman. Thanks so much for stopping in, and we'll talk to you guys, let's just call it Saturday morning. See ya.